Hush, 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 here comes the boogeyman.
Hi everybody! So the movie we're going to talk about today is Mike Flanagan's Hush. He also directed Oculus, which came out in 2013 and did pretty well in major theaters. But Hush, that's what we're talking about. It's on Netflix, available now. I actually just watched it a few days ago and I was pretty impressed. Primarily because it broke a few molds that scary movies tend to not do. Basically, Hush is a story about a deaf-mute woman who is in a cabin, isolated from the world, of course, when she is attacked by an intruder. We first start off with the woman. Her name is Maddie, and she is beautifully played by Katie Siegel, who did a wonderful job, primarily because she cannot speak and she can't hear, so she is able to carry this whole film without saying a word, which is pretty impressive. But let's backtrack a bit and recap. So, Maddie is hanging out cooking. She's visited by her neighbor Sarah, who they chit-chat for a bit, and then Sarah leaves Maddie alone. And while Maddie's cleaning up her mess, we see all this commotion going on in the background of her kitchen window. Because like in scary movies, her whole house is made out of glass, of course, very safe. And poor Maddie can't hear. Her friend is being savagely murdered just a few feet away. And this is when we first get a taste of our killer, because he is totally brutal, overkills Sarah. He stabs her at least a good 15-20 times, and I think that gives you an idea of who you're dealing with and just how brutal and violent this man is. And then shortly after, while Maddie is on her computer writing, she gets email from her sister. They FaceTime. FaceTiming and texting is her main means of communicating. And she goes looking for her cat. Her sister thinks she sees a movement in the background, so Maddie assumes, it's my cat, let me go find it. She walks around the apartment, doesn't see the cat, and when she returns to her computer, there are messages from her own cell phone. And as she looks through them, they're pictures of her walking around her apartment, and the very last one is of her right now on her computer. And so when she turns to look, there's an open door. And so this is when things start to change, because in typical scary movies, you go to look behind the corner and there's no one there. I feel like horror films rely on that suspense for the first half hour of the movie, and it's only until about halfway that the protagonist actually collides with the killer or the monster, but before it's a lot of mind games and a lot of suspense, and they think there's someone there, but they're not sure. But when Maddie turns the corner, there he is, standing, holding her phone. So I was very surprised that they chose to have him reveal himself, that they didn't play any more mind tricks. They outright said, yes, there's someone outside and someone's stalking you. So right off the bat, intense. Of course, she proceeds to lock herself in, and from then on, it's a cat and mouse game. She actually writes on the glass in her lipstick saying, I didn't see your face, I don't know who you are, leave me be. And this is what impressed me most about this film. Because horror movies rely so much on the boogeyman factor that whether it's Scream or Halloween or Urban Legend or Friday the 13th, the main villain or killer usually wears a mask. Because in horror movies, our imagination, it plays tricks on us. And when they have a mask on, we can create any evil that's behind that mask. And usually at the very end, when they reveal the killer, and sometimes they don't even show you what their face looks like, you see it's just a person. And I feel like horror directors shy away from that because they want you to think of their villain or killer as a larger than life, as this big demon, scary monster. And so I was really impressed with Hush when she tells the man, I didn't see your face, I don't know who you are, leave me alone. He takes off his mask and he reveals himself. And he is just a person. No monster, no boogeyman, no scary villain. He is just this typical white guy, tattoo on his neck, late 20s, early 30s. And so I thought that was really impressive because that's something you don't usually see. Especially when the horror villain or killer, when they start with the mask, they usually keep that mask until the very end of the film. So the fact that they revealed his face in the first 25 minutes of the film, I was impressed and I was surprised. So from then on, cat and mouse game. He's trying to get in, she's trying to get out. It's really intense and frustrating watching her doing all these little escapades to escape because she cannot hear. So when he's sneaking up behind her or creeping around the house, or she's trying to be stealthy, and she's making all this noise and she's completely unaware because she can't hear. And what's terrifying is that she can't even call for help. When he disrupts the Wi-Fi, she can't FaceTime, she can't email, so she's pretty much on her own, and I can't imagine anything scarier than that. So, she discovers Sarah, her friend, has been killed. Shortly after, Sarah's boyfriend comes. He tries to help, but inadvertently makes things worse because he ends up giving all this information about her unknowingly to the killer. And the boyfriend is unfortunately killed. Kind of Maddie's fault, actually. She distracts him at this key moment, and when he was trying to save her, and she gets him killed, unfortunately. One of the most graphic parts of this film, however, is the killer comes across her cat, and being the psychopath that he is, he goes to kill the cat as a message to her. And he has a crossbow, by the way. He's pulling a Daryl from Walking Dead. At one point, she manages to get the crossbow away from him and uses it on him and stops him from killing her cat. And as she runs back to the house for safety, of course, she drops the one crossbow arrow that she has, and as she goes to retrieve it, he slams the door on her hand. I mean, he could have easily pulled it open and killed her then and there, but I think it's more about making her suffer. So not only does he smash her hand in the door, he starts stomping on it, breaking her bones, and by the time she pulls her hand back inside, it is completely mangled. Her fingers are a wreck, and I think probably the most gruesome part of the whole movie. So as we continue on, eventually she gets shot by the crossbow, she's bleeding out, she attacks him, he eventually gets his way inside, because at that point she says, screw it, I don't care. She even writes in her own blood on the glass, do it, come in and get me. He finally gets in, and there's a struggle. She ends up spraying him in the face with this almost disinfective insect repellent, taking away his vision. She has this very obnoxious, violently loud fire alarm that she uses. So in a way, it kind of evens the playing field. She can't speak and hear, and so now she took away his ability to see and to hear. And so they begin to wrestle. And as he's about to choke her out, what I thought was actually a beautiful take from the director is as her heartbeat slowing down, we see flashes of her life. And I thought that was actually really beautiful to see parts of that. I thought it was very powerful. But of course, she pulls through, she grabs a hold of the corkscrew and punctures him right in his jugular and pulls it out, and he bleeds all on top of her. So before she passes out, she calls 911, and when the movie closes, she's sitting on her porch. We see all the sirens coming to rescue, all the cavalry is back, all this commotion, her friends are dead, the killer himself is dead, but for her, everything is silent. So Hush was, not the best movie I've ever seen, but what I really enjoyed was the suspense, the fact that she's so limited, and she's still a badass and kicks ass and everything and kills this man, but in a way she's so helpless because she's so isolated, and things we take for granted, like speaking, calling for help, and even just hearing, it made the situation a little more intense. In scary movies, we tend to see some people blind, maybe in a wheelchair, but I've yet to see one to this effect. So Hush was great. It's only a 4-person cast. Again, I was very impressed that it's able to hold your attention and entertain you with very little dialogue. She has a few inner monologues, and the killer talks a little bit to her, but besides that, the movie's carried on expression, and that's it. So I thought she knocked out of the park with it. Katie Siegel, the actress. I was really impressed with the director's take, especially on masking the villain, because that's so rare in horror movies. So on my scale 1 through 10, I give Hush a solid 7, primarily because it broke through some molds and it was surprising. So good job, Hush.
Just pretend that you're a crocodile, and you will find that bogeyman will run away.